Thank you for this kind invitation, and I got a glimpse of the important discussions that have been taking place during the day. Obviously, because of time difference, I haven't been able to follow the whole day and the whole conversations, but I'm hoping that I will add something to the discussions you've been having today. So in a way, I think it's a good bridge to follow from Scott's expansion of the discussion in time. What I will try to do is to expand the discussion in space, as I'm also offering a rather bird's eye view, in a way, to many of the conversations around digital cities, trying to go beyond that binary in the discussions about smart cities versus dumb cities. And actually, what I will try to do in the next few minutes is to decentralize technology and to give a perspective to digital cities through the human. So I'm using here as a key reference my new book that some of you might have seen and many of you might have not. It's a new book published by Polity Press called Being Human in Digital Cities. And this is my attempt to think about the role of humans, human agency, what it means to be and become human in what we broadly refer to as digital cities. As I said, I'm trying to rethink the role of the human, as an analytical category, but also as an empirical category in our conceptions of the digital city. And and this is where we are with some visuals. So can we go to slide 2, please? So when I started thinking about what should go to the cover of my book, I did what many of us do. I turned to Google and to Google's wisdom for inspiration. So when I typed digital city, these are the images I got back. Surprisingly or unsurprisingly for many of us, perhaps what we see here is a repetition of very similar images of what the digital city is supposed to be. So what we see here are sleek, neat, and very blue images of incredibly connected cities. But as a rule, in this imaginary that is probably also generated by AI, there's an invisibility of humans. So we see that invisibility of humans, I think, in many different imaginaries around digital cities, sometimes also in research imaginaries. But it is this kind of observation that we see here that generated my curiosity over many years and the question driving my contribution. So the key question I'm asking here is, what if we start from the human, always in quotation marks, what if we start from the human rather than technology when we try to understand the significance of digital cities? Human significance for society, economy, and for life itself. And what if, more specifically, we think of the human in plural, urban human in their diverse and unequal plurality across, but also within cities, seeking to see not only those occupying the city's glass skyscrapers that we see on the screen, those having access to the latest iPhone, as perhaps most of us, but also to think about those occupying the urban and transurban margins. We know that digital cities look and feel very different depending if we approach it from the penthouse, from a council estate, or through that AI generated imaginary in our screens. Choosing to remember or to forget these different positionings of how we understand digital cities shapes the very stories that we tell. So when I started researching this book, which draws on research across 7 different cities across different parts of the world, I realized that I wasn't actually alone in this quest to see humans in digital cities. To my surprise, I found actually myself in strange companionship. big tech, mainstream media, and different institutional actors, all speaking about and on behalf of urban humanity. Could you please put on the next slide? Delete technology, add humans is the headline of a Forbes story. So the International Business Magazine where this article appears talks about cities, but not about any kind of cities. After the smart city's death, we read, digital city is the new normal. And why is that? Because digital cities, we're told, unlike so many smart cities, are apparently, quote, built on with a focus on the citizen, small business, enterprise, and consumers. Everyone wins, closing the quote. This kind of human centrism, I soon realized, is all but a glitch in corporate policy and media discourse of technologized cities. A headline in The Guardian that you also see here about the day after the failed Google planned smart city of waterfront Toronto reads, quote, Toronto swaps Google-backed not-so-smart plans for people-centered vision. And the conservative newspaper, The Telegraph in the UK, confirmed my hypothesis about this new digital human centrism when it joined the chorus with a headline on digital cities, of the people, for the people, by the people. The examples I came across are endless. The media, big tech, and policymakers tell us that we need to put our money, our faith, and of course our consent in furthering technologization of cities, from urban sanitation and security to democratic and sustainable conduct. We should do so, we are repeatedly told, not because we believe in technocentric futures, as has been the case or as was the case with smart city projects, but now because we actually believe in humane futures. The dominant discourse of the digital city, I repeatedly saw, is tied to a promise of rehumanizing cities against the dehumanizing urban conditions of pollution, division, and crime. Digital cities are no longer imagined and planned as technocentric and market-oriented projects, but actually as ethical projects that advance or should advance, we're told, progressive, equitable, and sustainable futures. Of course, speaking on behalf of humanity is not unknown in hegemonic discourses of change throughout history. We know the long histories of colonialism and capitalism justified, we saw repeatedly decisions about resources extraction, natural resource extraction, and their unequal distribution, very often being justified as a cause that is being made in the name of humanity. Of course, always in the name of a selective and hierarchical humanity. But we also see not only a continuity of that long trajectory of hegemonic discourses claiming the human, but we also see something new in this hegemonic human centrism in digital cities. How the digital order is how we see how the digital order that promotes urban futures of surveillance, predictive policing, privatization of public space, and automated assorting of rightful from unrightful claims to resources actually becomes opaque. And it becomes opaque precisely because all change happens in the name of humanist, progressive values, what I refer to as popular humanism. So popular humanism appears as seductive because it promises that technologies can humanize the dehumanizing city. Yet it is, of course, dangerous because it incorporates progressive humanist values to actually secure the existing and deeply unequal urban order. Because this order is embedded and dependent on technologies of the ordinary, smartphones, transportation infrastructures, and digital networks of work and pleasure, it is effective precisely because of its opacity. But the space of the ordinary, everyday life, of course, we know is messy. So unlike the popular humanism, and is clear an ideal version of human digitally generated futures, everyday life is a space of order and control, but it's also a space of negotiation and exploration of what it means to be and become human in the city. And this is the space of what I call demotic humanism, the performative space of experimentation, of consumption, sometimes of survival, often played out in the contradictory everyday uses of the digital. We see that from TikTok performances of urban identity all the way to hashtag activism. In my research across different cities, the sightings of demotic humanism are endless. For example, in East Los Angeles, I saw how locals, and I heard how locals use WhatsApp messaging to alert each other when there are ICE immigration raids. People often turn to that simple everyday technology of WhatsApp messaging to contest the border police's very sophisticated surveillance infrastructures. In Havana, in Cuba, I also witnessed how urban poor are making a claim to communicative justice through their very simple claims to the use of powerful Wi-Fi. A right access to powerful Wi-Fi is usually enjoyed mostly by luxury hotel residents. But I saw how in every day many Habaneros congregate around the four-star hotel gates and use their smartphones to actually claim a piece of that privatized space of connection, turning that into an agora of digital publicness. But I also saw, of course, in European cities repeatedly how the par excellence technology of the urban ordinary, the smartphone, worked both as a communication tool, but also as a monitoring device. So many migrants are well aware, and they told me repeatedly that their smartphones are much more than communication tools. At any time, they know that authorities can use their smartphones to control their lives. As in many European countries, police has the power to demand from migrants to share all their phone data. For so many of them, freedom to move and to speak is always conditional, as the monitoring technologies of the border are always on. It was precisely these contradictory observations of urban humanities' presence, recognition, and misrecognition across digital cities that puzzled me during my research. And the following question for me was that if digital cities have become human-centric projects, what has and what comes out of this? As I tried to explain, of course, very briefly, popular humanism effectively normalizes an order that hides the violence of structural inequalities and surveilled lives by promising technologically induced democracy and sustainability. Demotic humanism reminds us that humanist values are not the subject of an intellectual debate alone. Humanist values, we see in practice how they're manifested in everyday claims for dignity and freedom, often made through the same technologies that deny those exact rights to many. Popular humanism does little to liberate people, and demotic humanism holds that promise, but of course it's caught in its ambivalence. So are surveilled and unequal futures the inevitable fate of urban humanity, I ask? The concluding argument in my book is that we need another humanism. The debate is not necessarily machines against the human or the smart city against democracy or with democracy, but actually what I argue, humanism is all over our experiences of digital cities, but what we see are competing humanism. So what we need is another humanism, what I refer to as critical humanism, and that's a humanism as a force of transformative justice, not just as a narrative of justice that we see in popular humanism and in demotic humanism. So the hope of critical humanism I set forward is not an abstract vision for the distant future. It is actually empirically grounded, but also theoretically informed as a normative proposal that works at the same time as urban praxis as well as epistemology. So I have observed at least, critical humanism in urban praxis in different ways. For example, in grassroots, public performances and voices that momentarily unsettle platformized spaces of commodification. When we see grassroots podcasts that tell stories of migrant, urban resistance, and urban voices. We see the urban praxis of critical humanism in political protest that persist on defying the punitive logic of surveillance on the digital and material street. And we see that also in campaigns for state and corporate accountability against cities governed through predictive policing and surveilled street lives. We see also critical humanism as an epistemology, and I think the debates on critical humanism are gaining a lot of prominence in different conversations in social sciences and the humanities now. And this is an epistemology that resists anti-humanist and post-humanist arguments that the human is dead. If we're interested in transformative justice, as I am, we cannot give up on the human, I think, as an anchoring, though always diverse and non-essential category. I find Ruhut's Benjamin words very inspiring and important here when Benjamin says that post-humanist visions assume that we have all had the chance to be human. So the humanism I propose against popular humanism of the hegemonic vision of digital cities learns from the knowledge, but also from the imagination of radical Black decolonial feminist and LGBTQI humanisms in plural, and their denial to give up freedom and outsource that to debates on AI identification. And importantly, it learns from research participants' experiences and storytelling of the city, seeing and hearing from how they explore being and becoming human, and how they do so with others, humans and non-humans, under conditions often of limited possibility. I hope that myself have learned about humanism through my research in multicultural neighborhoods and urban refugee camps. In the very everyday acts of solidarity between neighbors, I understood how humanism is always relational, or what Mlabi refers to as ethics of compassion, equity, relationality. So ultimately, what I'm saying in this presentation and in the book is that we need to reclaim the human in our conversations on digital cities. And this is not a claim to recognize a singular conception of humanity, but a call to expand our intellectual and ethical imagination. And this is an imagination I want to conclude with saying that understands digital infrastructures neither as the problem nor as a solution, that critiques capitalist greed and colonial extractivism that breeds on the disruptive and destructive Anthropocene. And it is an imagination that opens up a conversation that I think we need to have about the ways that we conceive and work towards just and democratic urban presence and futures, sometimes within, sometimes outside, sometimes against technological change. Thank you.